Chapter 106. Would Tia be in trouble if I was her cavalier? It was the first question Perez asked when Mrs. Impigra visited Porak Palace and offered to be a cavalier. What? Mrs. Impigra blinked with her wrinkled eyes in bewilderment for a moment. This was because the answer to the words "this is an opportunity to make a good impression on the noble by avoiding the check between the Empress and the first prince" was unexpected. But Mrs. Impigra quickly regained her composure and asked in a calm voice, I'm sorry, Your Highness. I didn't quite understand what you were saying. So could you repeat it? When I was mobilized, I almost got Tia in trouble because of my position. Betta spoke in a rather placid voice. I know it's good for me to be her cavalier, but I won't do it again if my greed puts Tia in trouble. Mrs. Impigra opened her mouth after choosing the words for a while. You two must be very good friends. Varys did not reply to that. Instead, he asked a different question. If you choose me as a cavalier, you'll find it difficult for my chief. Why are you giving me a chance? Mrs. Impigra flinched and shook her head with a small sigh. Looks like the people below seems to have given you the slip of the tongue. I just don't have a mother or a family to empower, not eyes and ears. The wrinkles of Mrs. Impigra, which feels low, deepened. The only thing I know how to do is to take care of the palace's household. But the imperial debutant remains my full authority. Your Highness is free to let go of your worries. But Perez looked at Mrs. Impigra with red eyes, unable to know her feelings. As the sun set out of the window, Perez's eyes turned redder. The sight reminded Impigra of somehow unknowingly. Your Highness, Second Prince, really resembles His Majesty the former Emperor. I've heard that before, Lulak Lombardi once said. Perez is said to resemble the former emperor rather than the father, Emperor Jovinks. Mrs. Impigra looks at Perez with a long face and said, I don't think there's any new gossip going around just because Lady Lombardi and His Highness, who are already playmates, will be partners in the debut party. What will you do? Perez nodded after moments of thought. I'll do it, Cavalier. With that said, Perez first drew a smile on the corners of his mouth. Mrs. Impigra laid down her pen, recalling the day, and closed her journal. Then someone knocked on the door of the office. The Empress is calling. One of the maids of the Emperor's palace was once one of the children cherished by the maid chief Impigra. Yes, let's go. The maid chief Impigra lifted up her weary body. The distance from the imperial palace to the Empress palace, where her office is located, was now too much for her to walk. It was obvious the Empress palace maid was on purpose. Even though they knew it, they didn't prepare the courage in advance. Mrs. Impigra refused to show her hard work, but she could not hide her pale complexion and cold sweat when she arrived at the Empress palace. Welcome, Mrs. Impigra. The Empress did not recommend a seat even after seeing her hand shaking with a cane. I know you're busy preparing for the debutante ball, but I called the maid chief to make a decision. Please speak. Change the second prince to Cavalier of Camporia. Mrs. Impigra quietly wiped away the cold sweat running through her cheeks with a handkerchief. The Empress was a very beautiful and ambitious person, but he was blinded by that ambition and poisoned. No, thank you. Mrs. Impigra shook her head firmly. It was because the second prince, who had been calling Lombardi's young lady Tia and treat her in respect, was clear. It was just a hunch, but if he couldn't become the cavalier of Lady Lombardi, she thought that the debutante ball would mean nothing to the second prince. The imperial debutante ball is a very special event under the unique authority of this Fonta Impigra. A few days ago, you collapsed in your office and went to see a doctor. The Empress grinned and said, If His Majesty know that this year will be the last debutante of the maid chief, is that okay? Mrs. Impigra was nothing short of a grandmother to the Emperor. It was obvious that Jovains would order her to retire immediately and recuperate if he knew that the health of her handmaidens getting worse day by day. If I retire, I won't be able to stay in the palace anymore. The only home of Mrs. Impigra was the imperial palace. The Empress knew her well, waited for her surrender with a relaxed heart, but at the next words of the maid chief, the Empress' beautiful face was distorted. Then I'll have to put more effort into this year's debutante. It's going to be my last debutante dance. Then I'd like to say goodbye now. Hey, Maid Chief Impigra. The Empress, who did not know that the Maid Chief would give up her seat so easily, rose from her seat and raised her voice. However, the Maid Chief Impigra said, looking at the Empress with pitiful eyes, You reap what you saw, Empress. Keep that in mind. What are you? The Empress shouted, but Mrs. Impigra did not stop walking. Anyway, if this is her last debutante dance, there was nothing to be afraid of. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. Galleon Clothing Store headquarters located in Hazlet Market, capital city. There was Galleon sitting alone, sighing nervously, putting up a particular closed sign today. Phew, will Tia like it? Galleon's eyes were on the dress on one side. It was a green dress made of premium silk obtained by asking Madame Sasu. After Tia's debutante was decided, Galleon had been designing and creating all night long. Only one dress shone in the world of his daughter. Originally, he was going to discuss with Tia that he made it because he wanted to give a surprise gift to his daughter, who does everything alone as a father. Should I have asked? And now Galleon was blaming himself in the past. It was because he was scared, thinking, what if she don't like it? Galleon, who was washing his face with tension, suddenly recalled his long-awaited wife, Shan. Tia's green dress, it's going to be really pretty. After giving birth to a child, Shan who was getting weaker day by day, held Tia in her arms, which was just becoming 100 days old. Shan was a very mysterious woman. On the first day they met, she was a woman who was walking, looking straight at herself, like someone who knows that on that day, their relationships will begin. Shan also said odd things from time to time, like a person who can see the future. Green dress was one of those words. The words, which had been completely forgotten, revived in his sleep, and Gallion chose Tia's debut dress in dark green, and he stayed up all night drawing the design as if he was possessed. His hands were constantly moving as if it had been in his head for a long time, and the design of the dress was completed at the same time as the sun went down. At this day, Gallihan has been so busy making dresses. In Gallian's head, this dress was perfect for Tia. Delicate flowers embroidered with gold along the dress hem, sleeves, and neckline, the white and dainty pearls on the pleats that are placed on the chest and shoulders, and were gifts from Gallihan for the most precious Tia in the world. But what if Tia doesn't like it? There's no point in giving up. Then a courage was heard from outside. Tia and L'Oreal came in. Dad! When he saw her daughter running as hard as she could, Gallihan, who was in tears, opened his eyes wide as if he had never done so. Tia! Gallihan felt his heart full as he hugged Tia's body tightly with a lip. Tia was everything in the world to Gallihan from the day the little hand clenched his finger. For this child, it would not be a waste to lay down his life 100 times or 1,000 times. Every time he held Tia in his arms, Gallihan thought so. Wow, is this my dress? Tia stood in front of the dress on the wall. Gallihan's heart started beating fast, and after a while, oh, I love it. Thank you, Dad. Tia jumped into Gallihan's arms once again. What a relief. Gallihan let out a sigh of relief as he patted his daughter on the back. I'll hurry up and get dressed. Gallihan felt on the next test after Tia walked into the dressing room with L'Oreal. It would look good on her. You think it will look good on her. It felt like a long time. Dad, how do I look? Tia walked out of the fitting room and shouted loudly. Gallihan, who was bowing on intention, smiled. When he saw his pretty daughter, he raised his hands and screamed, I think it's perfect for me. Looking back, Tia was full of sorry. Shan died before her daughter was 1 year old, and Gallihan, who was left alone, was an immature father. Moreover, everything seems to be his fault, with Tia's growing and resembling his timid personality. Gallihan was just sorry. Tia was too much of a daughter for a bad father. Thank you, Dad. Tia smiled broadly as she looked back at Gallihan. The day has come when a child, who was small enough to fit in one arm, wrapped in soft and strong, grew up and wore a debutante dress. You should look better in front of the big mirror. Tia trotted in front of the mirror in front of the wall. Gallihan covered his mouth quietly. A drop of heavy tears fell and flowed down the back of Gallihan's hand. Ah, this is a child he's not good enough for. He didn't do anything nice enough to be the father of such a lovely child. The excitement and the voices talking with L'Oreal were so precious. You were right. Gallihan grinned as he kept his eyes on his daughter. Our daughter in a green dress is so beautiful. Shan's laughter, which seemed like a full stream of water in the hot summer sky, seemed to be heard in his ears. Gallihan kept his eyes on Tia to remember everything about this moment, and called her a long-awaited name. Shan, are you watching this? End of chapter 106. Chapter 107. The Imperial Debutante has begun. It was an Imperial Debutante that received much attention every year, but this year's banquet hall was even more crowded. This is the last debut party for Mrs. Impigra this year, right? It's the end of decades tradition, and I came to the capital in a hurry because I wanted to attend. Such a special event in the lives of the warring aristocrats was like a drought rain. Perhaps that's why those who entered the banquet hall were particularly excited, and after entering, they all had similar facial expression. Oh my God, I've never had such a spectacular and grand debut banquet before. As soon as you entered the banquet hall, there was a slight congestion due to the people who were busy stopping and looking around, but no one was complaining. Look at those beautiful flowers, someone sighed. Oh. Some people burst into laughter at the sight they saw for the first time in their lives. Originally, the Imperial Palace's debutante dance was known as a grand dance that showed the dignity of the royal family, but not to this extent. I feel like I'm in the fairy kingdom, not the banquet hall. At the words, the nobles around her nodded with their mouths open. The inside of the ballroom was decorated with colorful flowers. The interior, which could accommodate hundreds of people, was filled with the scent of flowers. A small chandelier descends from the ceiling, and around them, large flowers were hung together in circles, creating a dreamlike scene. On the arch-shaped door leading to the terrace, small white grain-like flowers stretched out like a vine and tickled the person's forehead. Soon after, the door and the wall on one side were filled with light pink and yellow roses to create a flower wall. Most of all, what caught people's eye was a small stream running through the entire banquet hall. The waterway along the wall was made of white marble, and clean and transparent water flowed softly. What the hell is this? Am I dreaming? Those who approached as if they were possessed took out a small flower floating in the stream and touched it, or sat on one knee and dipped their fingers in cold water. Today's debutante is going to be a long day. It's so beautiful. I heard a rumor. Lombardy State donated such a huge amount of money for today's debutante. I heard today that Lord Gallihan Lombardy's daughter is going to make her debut. Only then did people look inside the banquet hall, nodding convincingly. The last banquet in which Lombardy's money and all the know-how of Matriarch and Impigra were poured out. That alone explained their fantastic banquet. The banquet began in earnest, and the orchestra began to play. Only then did the aristocrats, who were a little shocked to see the banquet hall for the first time, begin to pay attention to other things. But what is this? Given the fact that they gave each one of the guests, I thought it was a banquet gift. Since the Pellet Corporation handed out diamond necklaces to those who attended their celebration, it has become a new practice among the nobles who give a gifts like this. The nobles carefully opened the small box in their hands with curious eyes. This is a diamond, isn't it? Oh my god! Inside the box was a gold button with the diamonds attached. The size and design would suit both women and men, making it perfect for use as a pin for clothing. It would be great for the lady who make their debut today. It's such a splendid banquet. You said that the name of Gallian Lombardi's daughters was Florencia, right? Now, no one in the aristocracy doesn't know her name. It was a banquet hall where everyone was excited and had an exceptional amount of conversation. Empress Rubini, who entered just when the atmosphere was bright enough, hid the trembling mouth behind a glass of wine. Even though the servant announced the Emperor's arrival in a loud voice, only the nobles near the entrance looked back and greeted her. The banquet hall was so loud and noisy that it was a simple thing to happen, but the Empress couldn't laugh it off. Everything about the banquet, which was incomparably luxurious, felt as if the maid Chief Impigra was laughing at her. Then Astana approached. Mother, Prince. The Empress smiled gladly at Astana, but her smiling face didn't last long. I heard a word that it's a banquet where the Lombardi donated. It's amazing. What? The Empress' eyes ached, but Astana said it in his stride. When a family member of the aristocracy has a debutante, they can decorate the palace in such a luxurious way. And what a diamond button. I'll go out very well with his diamond brooch. It will go very well with his diamond brooch. Astana fiddled with the diamond buttons he received as a return gift with great satisfaction. Snap! But the Empress roughly took it from Astana's hand. This poor thing does not suit the dignity of the prince. What a poor quality thing. The Empress' words were forced. Diamond is the most expensive, most difficult gem to get. Astana's face is distorted and took the diamond button from the Empress' hand again. The Empress' eyes opened, which she had never expected from Astana. It's ugly, mother. You have to admit it. Just because you hate Lombardi doesn't mean you can't do that. Prince, Empress Rubini doubted her ears. This banquet wouldn't have been a scratch if mother hadn't touched Mrs. Impigra. What is her beloved son talking about? But Astana's sharp words never stopped. And even if you're my mother, it's not acceptable to take my stuff away so recklessly. Unacceptable. The Empress staggered, small and shocked. But Astana only glares coldly at her like that and doesn't support her. How can you say that, Prince? How can you to me? However, Astana blew his nose and walked toward the hall in the center of the banquet hall and away from the Empress. Something about dignity, huh? Astana murmured irritably. He was tired of his mother's low morbid obsession with Lombardi and then Janus, who couldn't do a job properly. Hey, come here. Astana called the servant who was carrying a glass of wine on a tray. Astana was a prince, though he was not yet of age. It's also the Emperor's only enemy. The dithering servants eventually gave Astana a glass of wine. Oh, it's pretty good, huh? When Astana, who took a sip of wine, was so impressed, the servant quietly explained, it's a Carlo vintage wine. Then, isn't it very expensive? Astana, who doesn't know much about alcohol yet, has heard of it a couple of times, as expected of Lombardi. Lombardi's wealth was growing by the year. Not only the Lombardi family, but so did Gallian's clothing store, and so did the recently independent Pellet Corporation. Just by looking at this debut banquet, Lombardi was a special being. It's a big difference from a Janus who can't get a decent hunting ground. Patriarch and Janus eventually failed to get the hunting ground Astana wanted. A similar condition of a small land was provided under borrowed names, but it was not satisfactory. At that time, the servant standing in front of the door decorated with flowers raised his voice. Let's begin the position of the debutantes. Soon after, the tightly closed door opened and the first couple appeared. It was the debutant and cavalier this year when they performed their first solo dance. Lady Florentia Lombardi, as the only daughter of Lord Gallian Lombardi, with applause from the people, Florentia entered the banquet hall holding Perez's hand. The green dress and the fine brown hair that glitters in the light met the surrounding flowers and plant decorations, make her seem like a pretty forest fairy. Wow, what a great match. They've been growing up on the same boat ever since they were children, so they look much closer, don't you think? Astana heard the conversation of ladies and gentlemen, who said they were one of the social circles. Astana looked at Florentia and Perez, who turned his head until Tia's hand caught Astana's eye. Lombardi, Astana murmured, frowning at the aftertaste of bitter wine. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. Oh, I'm nervous. As I stood in front of the door to the banquet hall, where the debutant tension suddenly gathered. Lady, are you all right? Laurel asked anxiously as she swept my back. Yes, I'm fine. No, as a matter of fact, it's not fine. My heart is about to pop out of my mouth, Laurel. A little while ago, Lord Lulac, Lord Gallihan, and Madame Chananet's family arrived at the banquet hall. Oh, and brother. No, not even Clarivan. Yes, the whole family is here. Sure, it's your debutant day. There's no way they'll miss it. When I recalled that it was a big deal for all people in Lombardi to mobilize, it seemed to twist my stomach again. Why am I so nervous, Laurel? I think I'm going to faint at this rate. It's all about reading and dancing in front of people. Well, there are a lot of people, a lot of more, but you're okay. Other young people, especially Lady Gitterwall. At Laura's words, I looked back at Tiliana right behind me. Tiliana, whose complexion had turned pale, was staring blankly at only one place, shedding words from her cavalier's ear that comforted her. I approached Tiliana and said, Hey, Tiliana. Yes, the reaction is a bit late. If you're too nervous, why don't you drink some water? Yes, I think a frog just jumped into the dress. Yes, you can't hear anything I'm saying, can you? Yes, she's gone, she's gone. There seems to be no solution but to get beaten quickly because the banquet starts soon. Good luck. Taliana's partner, who I thought looked like Rainy last time, tapped her on the shoulder a couple of times and I'm back in my place. Niece, just stand still for a moment, Laurel said with a cautious face. She held my hair or clothes for the last time. I think I should go inside now. I'll see you inside, Miss. Don't be so nervous. Yes, I'm fine, so go in. Laurel looked back at me again and again, still worried. Whoa. Actually, it's not okay. The heart, which had been intact even when meeting the Emperor and the Empress and running a business with thousands of gold, was a mess today. You need to take a deep, deep breath. It was time to exhale and raise my head. Far away I could see Perez. Since when have you been standing there? I'm sure he's looking at me. Why is he doing that over there without even coming close? Perez, what are you doing there? Perez, who heard my voice, blinked once as slowly as he had just woken up. Tia. Then he called my name and slowly began to approach me. End of chapter 107. Perez, dressed in a neat black suit and the huge diamond brooch I gave him before. I glowed even more today. He's a genius who was capable using of aura when he was 12 years old, and he's so handsome. Perez's share price seems to rise vertically among the nobles. Perez, you look great today. Pretty, huh? Pretty, Perez said with a slight smile under his long eyelashes. Oh yeah, you're pretty today too, I answered half-heartedly. Thank you, but Perez was very grateful. I asked because I was a little curious. Are you not angry? Angry? To you? Perez opened his eyes slightly wide as if he had heard something strange. No, men don't like it that much when they called pretty, especially the kids. But Perez rather smiled furtively and replied, Tia likes pretty things. Yes, it was when I was mulling over Perez's words. Your Highness the Second Prince, Lady Lombardi. Mrs. Impigra approached us. It's time for you to enter. Finally, my heart, which had subsided a little while talking to Perez, began to fluctuate again. Whoa, I take a long deep breath, even though I know it won't help. Let's go in. Mrs. Impigra came out and said, gently pushing Perez on the shoulder. At the same time, the door, which had been closed in front of me, began to slowly open. The voice of the servant introducing me leaped from inside the banquet hall. Lady Florentia Lombardi, as the only daughter of Lord Gallihan Lombardi, it's the first debutant of all my life. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. After safely introducing himself and greeting each other, Perez and everyone stood hand in hand in front of their partner to perform their first dance. I can feel people's eyes all over my body. I whispered lowly to Perez, trying to force myself to relax. There are more people than I thought. I know. Perez, aren't you nervous? Perez glanced down at my hand and replied, I'm nervous. A liar. You're not nervous at all. Well, I'm glad. What? You're so handsome. People will see you more. Is that so? Perez stared down at me for a moment and continued, I'm glad to hear that. And that's when the music started. Now, along with the familiar music, we slowly began to step on the steps. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. The first time was smooth. I practiced so much that I had no fear of mistakes. However, as we moved on to the second half, the song changed when the tempo became a little faster. My tense legs were shaking as I missed a beat. I'm doomed. That was the only thought in the moment until Perez's arm, which held my waist tightly, supported my body. I looked up at Perez in surprise. It's okay. Perez smiled faintly and said a word in a low voice. Perez was leading me all by himself. Even as I was embarrassed and lost, looking into my eyes, I didn't lose my composure. This was the only thought in my head as I came to my senses again and finished the second half safely. When did he grow up so much? The one who was squatting in the woods and eating the herb leaves. When did you? Well, thinking so, the rest of the couples joined and finished the group dance once again. And when the music ended with cavaliers stepping back and bowing politely, Perez kissed me briefly on the back of my hands as people applauded. Surprised and flinched for a moment, but I didn't pull out my hand. Perez smiled when he looked up to see if I felt it. It was a deep, lingering smile. A beautiful face that anyone else would have looked at in a white way sounded a strange alarm to me. Something feels odd. It looked like nothing special, as usual, but something was different. Come here for a second. Once we were out on the dance floor, I grabbed Perez's hand and led him to the table where the drinks were. Fortunately, there aren't many people around. What's wrong with you? I asked in a small voice. What? Perez asked again with a casual face. I think he's trying to pretend. It doesn't work for me. Tell me quickly, what's going on? Ever since Perez appeared as debutant cavalier, it felt strangely strange and strangely annoying. There's definitely something. How can you? You know me that well. Perez said with a slightly frowned eyebrow. What new? We're friends. Isn't it obvious? Is that so? Perez smiled slightly for some reason as if he had lost his energy. Yeah, so tell me, what are you thinking about? Well, just, Perez replied, pointing behind my back. We had a hard time practicing together. I don't think I'll have any more chances to dance with you. Looking back, my father was approaching me with a big smile. I don't think so. Perez sidestepped my gaze as I blinked. Tia! In the meantime, my father approached me and hugged me tightly. Congratulations on your successful social debut, my daughter. I know, father. I can't believe I finished my debutante. It felt real to hear it through my father's mouth. 12 years old, in my previous life, I was old enough to go through the darkest dark ages of my life. Thank you, your highness. Thank you very much. I was honored to be Tia's cavalier. Perez also bowed his head as my father greeted him politely. My father nodded and smiled gloatingly at Perez and said, Of course, Tia, why don't you dance with me for the first time after the debut? My father slightly bent over and said, reaching out one hand to me, It's a common courtesy when you ask for a dance, but it's different because your father does it. Should I say that he looked much more natural and courteous? The ladies around him even looked back at my father. As expected, my father. Yes, Dad, I said, putting one hand over my father's. See you in a little while, Perez. We're not done talking. Wave to Perez and get back on the dance floor with my father. Unlike the debut group dance, which had to strictly keep the beat, light music was playing a little bit more than before. Maybe that's why other people were dancing in a much freer atmosphere. It's an honor to share Lady's first dance, Lady Lombardi. My father really spoke to me in the way he used to ask me to dance in society. I also answered to the rhythm of it. Of course, Lord Lombardi. And as soon as we joined hands, new music began as if it had waited, but I couldn't fully enjoy it. It was because people who noticed me and my father were looking at us. I was looking at my father while dancing, but I was filled with strangers as a background that passed by busily. When the first dance ended and the second dance began, my father called me as if he had noticed my condition, Tia, and my father looked around and nodded as if he knew it. Well then, at the moment, a slightly mischievous expression passed over my father's face. Gasp. Dad! My father held my hand up and pushed me lightly on the shoulder to spin in place. Haha, my father laughed like a child at me when I was surprised. So in the end, I can't help but burst into laughter. Haha, what are you doing, Dad? When I got back to the usual steps, my father held my hand tenderly and said, Now you're smiling, a little. My daughter. Oh, was I not laughing? I was dazed for a moment. My father spoke to me as if he was comforting me. You must have been nervous. Are you feeling better now? Oh, so earlier. There was a reason for his playful behavior, unlike my usual father. Obviously, after a big laugh, I felt much lighter. Yes, I'm fine now, Dad. You don't have to be too nervous, Tia. And one thing to keep in mind, my father said gently, dragging me to the edge of the dance floor. You don't have to stay in society. You can quit anytime you want, like you're leaving the dance floor, okay? Society is as hard and a cruel place as it is important to nobles. In fact, many women get too immersed in social activities and get hurt in severe cases. That's what my father wants to tell me, that social circles aren't everything in the world. Well, maybe socializing in a harder place for women. Tia's having a hard time. Suddenly, my father stops talking. Something was unusual, so I got a little closer and checked my father's face. Oh, Dad, are you crying? No, I don't cry. I just wonder when our Tia grew up so much. You're not crying. You're crying. My father blinks desperately, but the tears rising are much faster. Before I knew it, people around me were smiling and looking at my father. How the hell am I supposed to appease my crying dad? I once reached high and said, patting my father on the shoulder, Oh, Dad, don't cry. What's wrong with you, my dad? Yeah, good date, but that's such a fool. Fortunately, my father seemed to pull himself together soon. The father, who quickly wiped tears with his sleeve, smiled with his eyes, still wet and red. I can't believe I'm crying over your debutante. When our Tia gets married later. Oh, damn it. This time it exploded properly. My father shut his mouth and shook his shoulder, turning his head to the side. Is this what makes him cry? But then my grandfather approached me and asked, What's wrong with you, Galliahan? My father couldn't answer properly and be sniffling and printing tears with his lips. I sighed softly and answered instead. My dad asked me when did I grow up like this, and he was like this during the debut party. And what about when I get married? Huh, Grandpa? I'm doomed. Grandfather eventually catches his forehead. Oh, now I don't know. I was standing looking at my grandfather and father half worn out, and from the back, Shannonette approached me with the twins. I looked up at Shannonette, not even having the energy to explain. Shannonette looked at me and shook her head as if she knew even if I didn't tell her. There are a lot of eyes to see, so don't do this here and go that way. Grandfather and father sniffed and quietly followed behind Shannonette. End of chapter 108. Chapter 109. Whoa, a half-swallowed sigh flowed from Paris' mouth, who came out to the terrace and breathed in the fresh air. Although it was intended, it was uncomfortable for the nobles who kept talking to him and ladies who kept asking for dance requests. Paris crossed his arms, leaning against the railing on the terrace. It was because the main character who had been following him to the point of annoyance followed him to the terrace. I'm so glad you've got a good delivery, you. It was Astana who was drunk and bloated. Perez looked at such Astana with contempt and pathetic eyes. Then the tearful Astana, who was choked up in his throat, shouted, You, how dare you look at me like that? Then he tried to grab Perez, but it was a big waste. The impossible could not have been possible for Astana, who was drunk and reeling. Oh, Astana, who almost lost his balance and fell over the railing, gulped in surprise. But soon he realized, looking at Perez, and said loudly, pointing fingers, Enjoy it when you can. You can't even dream about it later, you lowly. Perez's eyebrows wriggled. It wasn't because of the word lowly thing that he has been hearing. He didn't care about those words anymore. Enjoy it when I can. Perez's action made Estana more elated. Now that Lombardi is young, you can pretend to be close to each other because it's an act of playmate. If she is a little older, you won't be able to do it. Perez did not answer, but Estana laughed knowingly. She is the daughter of Gallian Lombardi, although her mother's lineage is a bit flawed. It sounded like a dog breed was being judged. Gallian's money is more than enough, unlike you who disappear right now, and no one will look for you. Perez's mouth opened as if to spit something out and closed again. He had nothing to say. Unfortunately, all Estana's sneering remarks were true. These were all concerns that have been floating in Perez's head since Lulek Lombardi went to Porac Palace. You don't deserve to stand next to Florentia Lombardi. Away. Perez eventually gritted his teeth. I don't know if it's me. Perez's red eyes glared at Astana as if they were burning him to death. And one step closer, one step closer. What? Astana, who had been sarcastic to his heart's content, remembered that Perez has the power to spit out or something and took a step back. Perez, who pushed Astana's leg until it touched the terrace railing, spoke in a low voice. Wrong. What? Wrong. And after a moment's thought, Perez has come up with the right words. You are like Balzac. It was a word that Tiak sometimes used with really bad language. Well, what's that mean? Perez looked sneeringly at Astana's trembling legs and turned around. Enjoy it when you can. Perez, who only left that comment, went back into the banquet hall. Asterisk. Where is he? He's not going back already, is he? After coming down, my father and grandfather, I went around looking for Perez again, but he didn't even show up. As I looked around, I noticed a mid-teen-year-old boy with nearby platinum blonde hair and slightly dark skin. I'm sorry, but I don't want to dance. Straightforward, this doesn't exist in the ethics of the capital, so it's a bit of a rudeness category. Oh my, how could you say such a rude thing? Sure enough, lady who had applied for dance returned in great displeasure. Wah, rather the boy who sighed as if he was in trouble turned around and bumped into me standing behind him. I'm sorry, I'm so lost in my mind. Are you all right, lady? The boy grabbed me by the shoulder as if he was very sorry and handed me a handkerchief even though there was no dirty place. It's okay, the capital is very different from the east, so you must be distracted. When I returned the handkerchief and said so, the boy's eyes were round. How did you know I was from the east? Well, I knew when I saw young Lord's skin color and refused to dance a little while ago. I heard the east has a slightly different culture. No one in the capital uses the word. Wow, that's great. The boy who said so smiled broadly. The synergy effect was enormous when the colorful blonde hair, sky blue eyes, and fresh smile were combined in the light of the banquet hall. It's like a bright sun shining brightly. Looking at the smiling face, the boy readily reached out and said, Nice to meet you. I'm Avinox Roman. Oh, you're the son of the young Lord Roman who took over the title. I greeted Avinox hand in hand. I'm Florentia Lombardi. Oh, Lombardi. Avinox recognizes me right away. Nice to meet you, Lady Florentia Lombardi. There was no sign of flattering or trying to look too good. He was right and confident. Now I understand why I felt like the sun a little while ago. Then Perez, who had just emerged from the terrace not far away, was seen. Perez, here you go. Perez looked at me as I shouted. By the way, that look on his face was somehow alarming. I think he walks more than twice as fast as he normally does. Tia, where have you been? I went to get some fresh air. What? I didn't even know that, and I looked for you for a while. You looking for me? Perez's face looks oddly pleased with the moment. Then you'd find me, won't you? He's the one, of course. But as I talked to Perez, I saw Avinox looking at Perez with eager eyes. Oh, I'm Avinox Roman, your highness, second prince. There's a lot of spirit in it, and there's a laser flashing in the I think they're waving a glow stick somewhere in their back. But an unexpected answer popped up from Perez. Oh, this time, the Lord is Lord indeed. Roman. He seemed to know that the Eastern Lord of Roman has changed recently. Oh, he was a very smart kid. His beauty and sword skills keep covering Perez's brilliant brain. Well, do you know me? To be exact, he knows his father, Lord Roman. Perez nodded. Oh, thank you. I've always wanted to meet you someday since I heard that you're making your own aura at a young age. Turns out that Avinox was a fan of Perez. Perez looked very troubled in this situation. You've never met such a straightforward nobleman. It was a bit strange for me to remember the appearance of Perez, who possessed all the nobles of the whole empire and made them in his side. Oh, father, Avinox called someone who was passing by. Oops, Florentia. But the answer was Tiliana, who showed her face behind the man's back. Tiliana, who ran halfway to me with a glad face, introduced me to a group of people following her. This is Florentia Lombardi. It was people in fancy clothes, people with slightly tanned skin who boldly used bright colors. Among them, the tallest man in his late 30s approached me and greeted me. Hello, Lady Lombardi. I'm Indite Roman, the Roman family's householder. Despite the elongated scar on his chin, his straight smile was the same as Avinox. I heard you helped my niece Tiliana a lot, so I came to thank you in person. Oh, don't mention it. When I nodded, Indit Roman opened his eyes wide, as if he were surprised. Well, you're not surprised that she's my nephew, even though she has a different last name than me. No, I'm very surprised. What a calm personality you are. Tiliana stepped in from the side. In fact, I knew who Tiliana Jitterwell was from the time I heard her name. Indit Roman's younger brother, Tuke Roman, was married and independent, receiving a small estate called Gitterwell, and turned their castle into Gitterwell. I heard it's not uncommon in the East. However, the young lady, who was dark in the situation of the East, could not know the fact. I heard Tiliana was teased because she was misunderstood as an Eastern countryman. Wow, uncle. Tiliana jumped, but Lord Rumen just smiled mischievously. The heart of a Lady Lombardy, who helped the weak even though she didn't know that Tiliana was romance, is beautiful. I just did what I had to do. What a compliment. I wasn't bored thanks to Tiliana, resembled screaming. And it was Tiliana who spoke to me first at debutant training. Ah, as expected, Ruman gave me a happy nod. Then the people around them split apart and another group of people approached. Oh, Ruman. I see, Your Majesty. It was Emperor Jovanes and my grandfather following my father and caravan. Two colorful groups of people are gathered in one place, so of course the eyes of others at the banquet hall are drawn at once. Don't do this here, let's go up. It was an invitation to the back room that was only allowed to a very small number of people at the banquet. Yes, Your Majesty. Lord Roman nodded happily and gave perception to the surrounding family. Then only one man who seems to be the closest person quickly goes to Roman. Now that you've made your debut in society, come with me as the main character of the debutant, Florentia. It's a bit annoying, but I can't say no, so I slightly bent my knees to say thank you. In the eyes of Emperor Jofanes were in Perez, who stood beside me. Second prince too. That was all he said. Perez, who was formally invited as well, all headed upstairs together. As we all headed upstairs together, people stepped back and cleared the way. Many people's eyes stayed particularly on Perez. They were surprised that Perez, who was a prince but had no reputation, headed to the back room with important figures including the emperor. Perez also had a slightly stiff face, perhaps conscious of their gaze. I said with a tap on the side of such a Perez, if you go, there will be something delicious. Let's eat it while adults talk. Yes, let's do that. Only then did Perez smile and nod. Then he slowed down for a moment and looked back as if he were checking something. What are you looking at? Oh, nothing, Perez replied, shaking his head immediately and sticking behind me. And that night, it wasn't until a very dark night that we were able to get in the carriage back to Lombardy. Laurel and Clarivan called separate carriages to return to their respective homes, and all the families sat together in Lombardy's large carriage. On either side of me were twins, and Shannonette was taking care of my grandfather and my father, who had overdone with Emperor Jovings and Lord Rumen. I hate Tia. That's so mean. Gillian and Huron pout their mouths. Why again? When I asked bluntly, the twins started feeling. How could you not dance with us? Always be with second prince. No, it's just the second prince. Gillian sneaked a glance at Shannonette and said, Next time then, we're going to have a lot of banquets together. Next time? Together. The twins exchanged their eyes quickly and suddenly played rock, paper, scissors. I won, I'm first. Oh, Miran won and Gillia lost. Miran laughed out loud as if he had won the world, and Gillia tore his head off. Maybe it's because I'm young. I'm having a hard time after the banquet. They're so energetic. I was thinking about that, but the carriage rattled once. Drunken father leaned on my shoulder at the move. Tia, my father muttered frantically in a low voice. Our Tia, let's grow up a little slower. Just a little. Oh, my father. I patted my father's head small and opened the carriage window. The palace was moving away from the window. Asterisk. The day after the debutant, Perez, who had finished his sword training early in the morning, was having a leisurely breakfast. It was the same day as usual. Then, suddenly, Perez said to Caitlin, who was pouring drinks, Get ready to go to the academy. Yes, I'm going to the academy soon, but don't let anyone know yet. Perez raised his eyes and looked at Caitlin. The word nobody clearly meant Lombardy. Yes, thank you. It was Perez who knew how big it was for Caitlin, loyal to Lombardy. And today, a guest is coming, so it would be better to prepare. End of chapter 109. Chapter 110. Guest. Carlos tilted his head at the conversation he happened to hear. Knock knock. The knight of the Matriarch palace confirmed them that the visitor had come. Is it not a servant but a noble lady? Perez thought, looking at the lady walking in with her chin raised high. What a rude attitude. Caitlin protested in a loud voice against the lady who didn't even greet properly. Then the lady snorted softly, then reluctantly bowed her knees to greet. Good morning, Your Highness, second prince. Perez received the greeting with a nod without answering. The lady's eyes trembled, perhaps insulted. I have a message from the Empress. She asked for you to come to the Empress Palace now. Come with me, she ordered overbearingly, as if she was the Empress. Perez said, wiping his mouth with a napkin. I can't go now. What? The lady couldn't hide her embarrassed face and asked again. The Empress' order is to bring you now. I'm a little sick, Perez said, lowering his eyes under his long eyelashes. Tell her I can't go because I'm sick. What the hell is wrong with you? I'm sick. Perez snapped up the lady's speech. What explanation do I need when I'm sick? The lady had nothing to say. Either way, the prince declined the invitation, pretending to be sick even if there was no justification to enforce it. Carlos, see her off. Perez immediately turned away from the lady and began to continue eating. After Carlos took her out, Caitlin quietly approached and confirmed Perez's complexion. She was wondering if he was really sick. Perez spoke. She's not going to be the last guest today. It would be convenient to have a separate person attending the door. And he was right. The Empress sent another person an hour later. At first, the ladies who were her close aides, came one after another, and then later, she even sent officials from Angenes. But Perez sent them back, saying the same thing every time. I'm sick, so if you have something to say, the Empress can come herself. All the messengers who didn't know Perez would come in boldly and went back embarrassed. Eventually, it was about time. The sky was completely dark. In front of Perez, who is sitting in the drawing room, reading a book, Caitlin put down envelopes of various sizes and colors. These are invitations to banquets and social gatherings for the day. Today, Paris looked at the stack of envelopes thick enough to not to fit in one hand. He expected it to some extent, but the response was hotter. Deliberately walking around the banquet hall and dealing with the nobles, talking to him was rewarding. It was then, now, if you'll just... A screaming voice came at Kylo's bewilderment. And after a brief disturbance that ensued, the door to the drawing room burst open. Here you are, guest. Paris murmured, looking at the insolent visitor he had been waiting for today. Second prince. It was Empress Rubini who was in such a hurry to question the prince. The empress who strode in donned her smiling mask with chilling eyes that gazed at Perez. I heard you're not feeling very well. Perez saw through her. He glanced at the empress, quickly swiping the bundle of invitations he was holding. Kylus, Caitlin, get out for a second. I think this conversation will end much sooner. At Perez's words, the two paused, but soon went out and closed the door to the drawing room. Now only Perez and the Empress remained. It was the same situation the last time they talked, in the greenhouse. How come you didn't accept my invitation, Prince? As I said, I'm not feeling well, and I was a little busy. Perez deliberately pointed to the full invitations and said, then the corners of the Empress's mouth trembled. The prince, who is going to be to the academy soon, accepts invitations. What can you do? I've told you over and over again that I don't intend to go to the academy, and with so many people looking for me, I'm losing my mind. Perez stopped talking for a moment. Then he let out a little more provocative words. And after spending a lot of meaningful time with the emperor yesterday, I'm becoming convinced that the place I'm supposed to be is not an academy, but a capital. The empress curled her hands to the point where her thick rings left indentions. Perez curled up one corner of his mouth as the empress looked angry. All of this was a result of careful thought after Lombardi's visit. What the Empress wants most is for Astana to rise to the throne. Then Perez was the biggest and only obstacle to the road. And what they feared most was Perez gaining ground as a second prince. So he deliberately talked to the aristocrats at the debut party and spoke as if he were interested in banquets or social gatherings. The last invitation by the Emperor to the back room was an unexpected harvest. Throughout the banquet, Perez used the gaze of the Empress watching over him. And again, the Empress sent people away because of the sweetness from the very day after the banquet. Tell me what you want. Empress Rubini spoke in a distinctly different tone. What do you want? 10,000 gold. Money? 10,000 gold was a huge sum of money. In order to raise that amount of money, Angenes also had to dispose of several estates. But if that money can send Paris to the academy, Astana has nothing to lose. That foolish second prince was now saying he would relinquish all rights for mere gold. The empress, squinting and staring at Paris, suddenly snorted, all you want is money. I guess your lowly origins can never be removed from you. The empress looked at Paris contemptuously. But Perez was confident he needed money to walk the path he had in mind. However, Perez had no other choice but to support himself in increasing his power than to pay for his living expenses. Yes, I'll give it to you. It sounded as if she was playing a good game against a beggar. Instead, don't think about coming back to the palace until you graduate. I will. It's going to be a bumpy road anyway. 6 years at the academy was an opportunity for Astana, but it was the same for Perez. He had no intention of spending a leisurely vacation, and the Empress certainly said, until graduation. It was a 6-year academy, but there was an early graduation system for outstanding students. After receiving Perez's confirmation, the Empress stood up as if she had no more business. On the back of the returning Empress, Perez said, I won't leave until I get paid, so if you want to clean me up quickly, you'll have to hurry. The Empress, who was forced to borrow money from the near aristocrats, stared at Perez until the end and left the Matriarch palace. Caitlin and Kylus hurried up, but Perez only looked out at the moon and starry night sky and said nothing. Asterisk. Estira, who returned to the academy to complete her research and study, finally came to Lombardy. After Dr. O'Malley was expelled, she who had been idle became Lombardy's doctor, and Estira's first schedule, which started early in the morning, was my grandfather's medical checkup. Estira, how's Grandpa doing? I hurried into my grandfather's office when I heard that the checkup was over, so I couldn't wait and asked, as expected what? He's not feeling well overall because of constant overwork. He seems to have neglected to take care of his health while the doctor was away. I knew it. Overconfidence in his health was my grandfather's pet habit. I approached my grandfather, who was buttoning up his clothes, and said, crying, Grandpa, you promised to take the nutritional supplements I gave you. Oh, Tia has all the worries about this, grandfather. My grandfather patted my head. It seemed very good for his granddaughter to be concerned about his health. It's no joke. No, I'll have to leave the nutritional supplements to the butler and give them to him every day and reduce the amount of alcohol, okay? Even if I asked my grandfather to cut down on his work, it was impossible. Yeah, I see. Oh my God. Are you sure, Grandpa? Both Dad and Grandpa should take care of your health more. Tia, when I mentioned my father, Grandfather seemed to take my words seriously. Yes, then this grandfather promises you. Hold your little finger. Yeah. Grandfather smiled, intertwining his own on the pinky I gave him. My grandfather had another schedule right away, so I came out with Estira. I look forward to your kind cooperation, Estira. Yes, Lady Florentia. I came over to the annex and saw a certain carriage for the first time. It was a carriage with no family emblem, but it looked very expensive. There, Perez got off. Tia, what are you doing here, Perez? Do you happen to have a schedule today? Today? No, nothing special. Why? I was going to read a book in my room anyway. Then Perez asked me with a light smile, then why don't you go play with me today? I followed Perez out of the Lombardi mansion in a carriage. Where are we going now? I think we're getting out of the estate. We're going back to the capital. I have to find some stuff. Yeah, because Paris doesn't go well outside the Imperial Palace. I guess he takes care of everything he does once he comes out. I opened the carriage window, thinking the incoming wind was quite cool. My hair looks a little messy, but whatever. I was enjoying my leisure time with my eyes closed. I opened one eye slightly and looked forward. Perez. Yes, my face will be pierced. How intense Perez looks at me from the opposite side. I can tell even with my eyes closed. Do you have anything to say? No, not yet. Not yet. You have something to say, but you'll say it in due course. I shrugged my shoulders. Well, that happens sometimes in human life. Okay, I'll wait. Just tell me within today. It's still early in the morning and one day is long. Thank you. Don't mention it. I answered like that and closed my eyes again and enjoyed the wind. Then I opened my eyes as the carriage seemed to be moving slowly, and we were already inside the capital. But the view from outside the window was a little familiar. Ah, here, near Sudakuna Street. I've got a little business here in the workshop. The workshop? Wait, if it's a workshop, don't tell me. The carriage stopped, and as I stepped on the ground, I halted my steps. Then Perez said, getting off after me. It's the most beautiful accessory in the empire these days. I think it's a workshop set up by a diamond craftsman who originally belonged to Ivan. Perez said and stood by the opening of the workshop. I think it means I should go in first. I swallowed a sigh in my heart that was about to flow out. It wasn't that I couldn't come, because this was a place where I stopped by with Clarivan whenever we had time. The problem is, Tia, that's the guy who's tilting his head without knowing anything. In the meantime, I have drawn a line between working with Clarivan and private matters like Lombardi's family and Perez. It was to keep track of which is which, but when I saw Perez holding the doorknob of the workshop, I felt like the two worlds were mixing. Oh yeah, let's go in. I ended up in the workshop. I don't think it's going to be a big deal. The employee who received a small piece of paper Perez handed over, had a couple of words and turned back. They're bringing things out. I'm going to take a look. Take your time. It was a familiar workshop, but it felt a little different when I came as a guest. I was looking at the items on display one by one, and now I heard a familiar voice. Someone gave an urgent order after putting money on it. I didn't expect it was the little owner lady. Grandpa Crowley was laughing at me. The little owner lady? Perez muttered, tilting his head. Grandfather Crowley, a diamond craftsman, doesn't know I'm the owner of Pellet. However, the unique sharpness of an old man with accumulated years of age was uselessly shining. Ah, that's my nickname for Lady Lombardi. They say that she's the student of the Pellet's owner. But seeing whatever they were doing, I think Lady Lombardi is more of the teacher. Me and Clarivan acted thoroughly in front of others, and it was like this, even though no one had noticed yet. It's not me who came to buy things today. It's him here. Perez is dressed in modest clothes today and rides in a carriage with no imperial patterns. He doesn't want to reveal himself to be a prince. Oh, I see. Now check it out. Grandpa Crowley opened a small box and put it in front of Perez. Hairpin. Inside, it was a pair of hairpins. It was a design that could be used frequently with simple rubies attached. Perez took out a hairpin without saying a word. He put it in my hair, which was disheveled by the wind a while ago. Perez, I called him in embarrassment, but Perez looked closely at me with a pin and said, Pretty, Tia. Is this mine? Yeah, do you like it? Perez asked me with high expectations. It was a pretty hairpin that I couldn't help but like. With a face that looks like it's going to flutter, I don't think I can say I don't like it, even if it was to be full of rust. Yes, thank you. I'll use it well. Perez smiled quietly as I nodded and said. Perez, who was less emotionally expressive than others. So, if you translate that smiling face into an ordinary person's reaction, that is an expression that is excited enough. I can't believe the person who gave me the gift was happier than the receiver. I picked up the other one and stuck it in my hair to show that I really liked it. Perez's smile grew stronger. End of chapter 110.